Ladies and gentlemen, we are not working on a 2006 Chevy HHR with a 2.4 LT. We're just going to show you how to find and what the possible reason could be of the P0171 code on this vehicle. This code did not pop up until around 222k miles. It has over 223,000. When the code first popped up, it did cause some hard shifting, especially when you put the car in reverse. This only happens when this code actually pops up on this car. So I went online, checked on the code, I run my computer to it, and it still shows the same code. It says, first code, it says P0171, system 2 lean bank 1. So it's the only code that's popping up. So I did some research on it, and it's not even telling me if it's the oxygen sensor for the upstream. It's basically that code could pull up 9 things. 1, it could be your fuel pump. 2, your fuel pressure regulator. 3, upstream or the downstream oxygen sensor, which is bank 1 and bank 2. 3, your evap. 4, could be a vacuum leak. 5, your intake manifold seals could be the problem, or a cracked flange, or your flame gasket exhaust seals could be going bad, or dirty fuel injectors. But the thing is that when I crank up the car, it doesn't hesitate. It doesn't hesitate shutting off. It doesn't putter or give me any type of acceleration issues when it's driving down the road or at idle. The vehicle does not stall or anything. So I changed the bottom oxygen sensor on this thing about 3 months ago, because it was shot. It was really black, and that could have been done to it not working properly, or it could have been done to too much fuel mixture over time. And it was never changed on this car. I don't think so, because it still had the old GM part on there, and plus it has some white marks on the end of it added with that black mark, and it was shot to shit. I installed it, the code went away, it didn't come back on until 2 weeks later. And so I did a second scenario, and the thing this was the cheapest route, was to replace the front intake manifold seals. Now, most people would say that that code does not follow with that part, but that's a damn lie, because any of those seals can cause the P0171 code. People could say, oh, it's the oxygen sensor, or it's your evap. No, because when I first bought the car, it told me my evap was actually bad, and that code does not even pop up for the evap. So I thought the map sensor might have been going, but that's also not the code for the map sensor. The map sensor is new, which I know that doesn't mean anything these days. So when I checked the map sensor, the map sensor down here, everything was working properly. I checked this, because even this was replaced last year, still no problems, and it's receiving enough to what it's supposed to be doing. So I checked this line for leaks here that runs to the back of the evap. I've even checked the wiring on this is really good and was really perfect. I even checked the port on this. It was good. I cleaned it. Now, I was thinking that maybe this hose was actually busted because it was old, and it doesn't even want to come off of here, so I was scared to pull it off when I replaced the intake manifold seals. So I just left it. I actually got it off after I had to loosen all this up, because the clamp was twisted the other way, where you couldn't get a pair of pliers or needle nose in there to pull on it. So I roll this all the way up. This hose looks like it's been through some heat. It's not hard. It's still stiff. It's a little soft still. But eventually, here, probably another year or so, it may need to be replaced. But there's no cracks or anything. And I also thought that maybe this thing busted again. Not this hose, but this thing, because it caused that code the first time. Well, this hose is fine. It's clamped on there. It's not cracked. This was not busted. This has no holes in it. These are tight. I even checked the new hose I put on here, and it was good, and it was tight. But when I did check the intake manifold seals, I'm glad I did replace them, because they were just so damn dry rotted that it wouldn't, I mean, it was falling apart in pieces when I tried to pull up on it. So I had to get a little small flathead screwdriver to try to pry it out on the edge to be able to pull on it. Then it came out. Every single one of those intake seals were dry rotted, and I could tell they were the original GM ones because they're like that faded green look, and I know what the GM ones look like, especially on these Ecotechs. And I could tell it was already due for a change and due for the miles. And plus, there was a little bit of oil or fuel mixture that was on the actual, around the third cylinder on this, underneath this thing. It was on the actual block. The only place I seen an actual oil mixture leak. So I had a feeling that's where the that's where my actual leak was. So I cleaned up the engine block really good, put the new seals on, and put everything back together the way it should be been. So I actually looked for cracks on the actual intake manifold because these are really plastic and they're almost like paperweight. I didn't see any cracks or anything on this, so I know everything was good, unless the ball inside this thing is actually going, which I'm not for sure if that's the issue. I checked the map sensor, even though it was new. I checked the plugs on it and everything. There was no cuts, and there was no bent wires, no corrosion, or no burnt marks on the ports. I checked the throttle body, cleaned it out again, made sure everything was good. Checked the connectors on everything. Everything was good. I checked my fuel injectors. They were all squirting out, so I know they had a good pressure. And, I mean, the fuel injectors had some dirt and debris around the top of it, but not on the actual part where the fuel comes out. So I went ahead and cleaned those up. And around the holes where the fuel injectors go into the block, they had a lot of dirt and debris around it. So I cleaned them out really good before I put everything back together. And just the FYI, if you're taking this intake manifold off, I recommend going ahead and changing your oil pressure switch sensor and your crankshaft sensor, because you can't, it's hard to get to your crankshaft sensor when it's actually right beside this thing. It's really difficult even to get the oil pressure switch out. So if you are actually having an oil leak on this thing as well, like between here, because I did at one time, come to find out, I guess the oil pressure switch that I installed, it was leaking before, so I put a new one on there, and it was still leaking. I'm like, okay, I was thinking that maybe my oil cooler was leaking the seals, and those seals are really expensive. They're like $31, $37 a piece, and they claim there's 2 of them. But they didn't have any in the United States. They had one from Canada, and they almost wouldn't pay $20 for shipping extra added to the $31 just for one seal. I said, no. I'd rather buy a whole new cooler, which those are really hard to get for this car too, and the whole unit itself is like $300. So I put a new oil pressure switch on after I installed it. It was still leaking. Come to find out, after I had this off, it was still a little loose, and that might have been due to the fact of how much room I didn't have when this was on here. So I tightened it up really, really good, and I haven't had any oil leaks since. And the funny part about it was I was going to change my crankshaft sensor, and the company sold me the wrong one, made for a whole different vehicle. I'm like, are you serious? So so since it was still working properly, I cleaned it up really good from the remaining debris of the oil leak from the past. Cleaned it all up, stuck it back in, and everything still seems to work fine. I haven't had to have any problems with the new gaskets I installed. I even installed the new throttle body gasket, which was separate, because the 2 throttle body gaskets they gave me with the intake manifold was totally wrong. And so I had to order that separately, which was like $10 for that extra seal. Which is kind of funny because O'Reilly's and AutoZone don't carry that one in stock ever. You had to wait 3 days to get it, so instead I went to Amazon Prime and got it for like $2 cheaper. It's just the black one. It's the only difference. The color black, it just matches the motor. And to me, it wouldn't really matter because no one's going to see it anyway. So I checked everything here. Everything was good. So I haven't replaced the upstream oxygen sensor yet. I'm thinking that might be the next goal to check, even though it does need to be changed eventually, but it wasn't fried. fried like the other one was. So I'm thinking that maybe the one on top has been replaced before, unless it's got air coming out somewhere between the hole and the seal on the oxygen sensor. But I'm going to replace that one next. I mean, they're expensive because mine's got the triangle type, and they run about $115, $115, but Amazon has the same brand, which is a Walker brand, for only 39 bucks. The same one, the same part number, and it's direct fit. So I'd rather get it off Amazon because I know it's a good brand and it will work. It's not just some random brand. It doesn't say direct fit. Now, just a reminder, if you put any oxygen sensors on this car, make sure you get the ones that says direct fit. Do not get the ones that do not say direct fit, because if you do, the wire could be too short or it may not clip in right, and I had that problem with the downstream. So in the previous video, I was showing you how to install the oxygen sensor, and come to find out, they sent me the wrong one. Mine doesn't. Mine takes the 4-pin connector, which has a male end, and it connects to a female end on the motor. Motor's wiring harness, which is kind of weird. And they kept selling me the wrong one every time. So after I went to O'Reilly's and ran my VIN number and added my vehicle, it goes through my VIN number now, so it makes it a lot easier for me to find the parts. So I'm not going through a wild goose chase trying to find seals, because I guess the seals was a wild goose chase from the start. I mean, because they kept giving me the wrong ones. I had to keep taking it back. But that only happened maybe a couple times, and I found out the reason why. So I would start replacing the seals first. If you don't trust mechanics and you trust yourself more and you know what the hell you're doing. I'm not saying I'm an expert at everything, but I'm not going to give no mechanics $79 to $100 to test out, to find my problem with my car, and I could find it for myself, because eventually I do. I went through the same thing when I had my old Chevy Cruze, had problems, I could fix it, but when I seen how bad the seals were on the intake, I think I'm gonna try to figure out how bad the seals are on the rear intake, and plus the gasket seals on the exhaust. I hope this video helps about the P0171 code. I'm not saying everybody's going to have the same exact issue, but also just be sure you check your flex pipe. Make sure it don't have like a small crack. If there's any type of white decay on the back of it somewhere, that could be like any white decay, like kind of looks like antifreeze leak. Just make an example. If you see like a white mark anywhere, like a line or a streak or like a little spread type, line, or like a little circle or whatever. If you see down on your flange or your pipe that connects to your flange, and that tells you right there that you do have a gasket leak or a cracked intake manifold. Now, I wouldn't recommend not soldering, welding those, because they are iron and they do crack easily. But if your intake is actually cracked, then you're going to have to buy a new one regardless. And I know with these vehicles, they may be difficult to find locally. So your best bet is probably ordering it offline. If you have any comments about this problem with this code, you may feel free to comment. And as soon as I actually find out the actual solution for this, I will let y'all know. But just also a tip that when your vehicle starts jerking hard, that means that code's about to pop up, because that code only pops when my transmission starts to shift really hard. It only happens when the code pops up or it's getting ready to. But once I reset it, it goes away. It's not a transmission issue, and I think what it is that I'm thinking that my engine's getting more air than it is fuel. But if you changed all your seals and everything and it still doesn't work right, fuel injectors could be the next bet, but your other main priority could be the fuel pump or the fuel pressure regulator. I'm hoping I don't have to go that route, because the way it acts, it clicks, it works, it doesn't give me problems. My float's working properly, not having any gas loss or any mileage performance issues whatsoever. Well, I hope this video helps, and y'all have a great one.